Shut up and sit down.
Man, because if you're the name that people associate with something, whether that's like a coaching business or a fucking podcast or a speaking thing or whatever, like you should only be at a relationship, like a building and developing relationship and opportunity level. The task elements that go into that should be handled by someone else, right? Maybe not in the beginning because you don't have the capital to do that, but like, yeah, I agree with you. Like delegation, I read a study once. It was based on lawyers, so it's like a little bit specific, but it was like lawyers that are good at delegation become partners faster, which is logical. They make more money over the first 20 years of a career, which is logical. Like law is like all the time about like details and contracts and shit like that. You should not be in those if you want to be at a money level, right?
Right.
You should prove your aptitude and worth in those so that people are cool with you advancing and having greater financial like earnings and responsibility or whatever. But like that should not be what drives you, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing, and we've talked about this too. We have so many more shows we need to do. We've talked about people's shitty relationship with money. Like, how long have I been saying I needed to hire an admin? Like, how many years? Like, literally since you've known me.
Right. Almost like probably since I've known you, which at this point is like over 3-4 years. Yeah.
Yeah. And I finally just went, whatever, I need to hire an admin. Here's what I have to spend. Who wants to work for that amount of money? Because it literally is like just typing recipes into a Word doc for my blog, for my food blog. It's not even pertinent to my coaching or editing businesses, right? Which is another thing. Like I have 4 different businesses.
Right.
Which I'm happy to have. I love having them.
Right.
But I need somebody that's going to be an admin to help the overarching process.
Right.
And eventually I'll have to hire an accountant and, production staff and all this other stuff. But you can't sit there and shoot all over yourself and not step into it, because I'm going to tell you right now, if you hire somebody to do 4 hours a week of work, you'll figure out a way to pay them.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. And that's the thing too, is like I struggle with this from a just like a personal standpoint and a pricing standpoint and stuff, right? But like a lot of times, like the hardest thing about individual pricing off of what you just said is that you need to find a level where like the money is high enough that the person paying you cares about it and is invested in like giving you the info you need and the projects can go okay, right? But low enough so that like you're not exposing yourself to being wiped out when they have a reversal, right? So there's like this weird middle ground of doing that shit where you're like, you're just trying to figure out like, how can I stay relevant but not expose myself to like the whims of this person or this business, right?
Right.
So yeah, that's just something I thought of when you were saying that.
No, that's totally valid. I think I touch on this a little bit in my empowerment coaching. I'm not up to speed on, I have no desire to be a business coach, but some of the empowerment training I give is along those lines where, again, I hired this woman. I'm going to figure out how to pay her. I told her, I said, this is what I have to pay. I'm going to pay you this amount per hour. I'm going to pay somebody this amount per hour. Is that something you're interested in? Here's the key to real quick key to creating jobs is you have to create jobs that make the economy better. So you have to create a job that pays somebody a living wage.
Yes, I agree with that.
Pay somebody minimum wage and expect them to have a better life. No, you can't do that. They're going to hustle harder and hustle longer, and eventually they're going to burn out on your crap and walk away from you because somebody went, oh, I'm going to give you 50 cents an hour more.
Right.
You cannot run a company that way. You actually have to, like, I'm going to out with it. I'm paying my admin $20 an hour.
It's actually very good, man. I would have thought it'd be like 12 to 15 personally.
Yeah, and that's what lots of companies want to do. But you know what? I tend to pay the person over the position.
Right.
Like, I have a baseline, like, I won't go lower than 15 for the position.
Right.
But she's got 20 years of experience on this.
Right. Right. Well, yeah, pay the person over the position, man. One of my
which is a better economic model for any company. I don't care who you are.
right. One of my girlfriend's friends has like a title leasing company type deal, right? And it's basically like her and her husband or whatever. And I think so. Anyway, she got to a point where she could hire like 2 staff or something, right? And within this person position discussion, she got somebody in that was like retired in that area. This is like, I don't know, rural Texas, basically. So you don't have a huge talent pool necessarily. But she got somebody in who like had a bunch of experience and had been in corporate and was retired, and like old lady, like has her shit together, right? And this girl like wanted to just like pay her in accordance with position, like how it was initially defined, and was like talking. I went to some wine festival with her and her husband. It was like a year ago. And she was like, "No, I just want to pay the position." I'm like, "You can't fucking pay the position when someone's got 35 years of experience, right? You got to pay the person at that point, you know?"
Yeah, at that point, well, really what you need to do is you need to establish, here we go back to poker playing. Every poker player knows what they'll pay for a hand. You just know what you're going to pay for a hand, right? Like, I know what I would pay for quad aces versus a pair of twos, right? I absolutely know what percentage of my chips is going out on that table versus nothing, versus my favorite hand, 9-2 offsuit. Like, I know how to play those hands.
Right.
And that's the point with every job that you're paying. Like, first of all, you pay the position, right? So you just establish a baseline price. What am I willing to pay? If somebody with zero experience comes in asking to get some experience, what am I willing to pay them to teach them how to do what this is?
Right.
With my admin, I don't have to teach her anything. She's got 20 years of experience. She knows how to type and how to read.
Yeah.
She probably has
100%.
more experience because we're in our 40s. She's probably been doing that since she was a kid.
Right. I wonder that shit too. Is like, we're going to need to do a separate thing about this. And we did one maybe like a year and a half ago that was similar to this. But like on the whole hiring front too, you just made me think of it. I just wonder, like, pandemic wise, when we come out of this, here's my biggest fear situation is that we move to a desperation economy where every employer is like, I'm going to go as low as possible because I know someone will fill it because they've been missing paychecks, right? That's my fear. And then my positive is, which is going to take time to get to, I kind of hope some companies hire in a way where it's like, hey, you don't know this stuff 100%, but we will help you get there because we realize the importance of having a job, right? For most people. So like literally before we started taping, some guy messaged me and was like, hey, do you know anything about medical billing? Because I need some like content around it. And I was like, no, but I can learn. And he was basically like, I'll move on to the next person. And I'm like, well, what the hell is the promise to anybody of like getting educated and being taught to think critically if like the fact that you haven't done that exact thing beforehand is going to eliminate you from the discussion, right?
We need to have a show on that as well because I'm a I'm what they call a multi-potentialite, what they used to call a Renaissance man, what they call a polymath.
Right.
And you are very much the same thing. And we actually just need to sit down and do an hour on that. People
Yep.
are confused about what I do because I do a lot of things, and I have done a lot of things, right? I have a lot of education, a lot of encyclopedic knowledge in about 7 different subjects
Yeah, for
that
sure.
people look at me and they're either really sketchy about, yeah, there's no way she can have that kind of, like, she's spread too thin, she has maybe surface knowledge. Dude, I've created DNA and RNA in a lab. That's how far my
Oh,
genetic
really? I
education
didn't even
goes.
know that. That I don't even
Right.
think I know. I
Yeah.
knew, rather.
And that's just my biology education. You know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. The polymath thing, I feel like we need to do a whole nother thing on. Because there's not really like a standard place for them in it.
No, and there's so many different ways for those of us who are to have a career. Like you're different than me. Like you work at a place for a little while and are done with it and want to move on. Whereas I'm totally okay being a slasher and having 9 things in the air.
Yeah,
But we
for
both have
sure.
the same polymath characteristics and an encyclopedic knowledge. And the thing that makes us an advantage to any sort of contract or even just to any good job, because so many polymaths just have jobs,
Right.
is what sets us apart is our ability to gain that encyclopedic knowledge rapidly and
Right.
comprehensively
Right.
and use it in
Right.
every avenue of our lives. Like we can,
Right.
I played Tetris for I don't know how long as a teenager. Let me tell you how that came. Who knew that would be a skill?
Yeah, man. I used
Now
to
that's a
play
skill.
it I used to play it around like 10 to 14 all the time, man. It was a
But now I
big
have a hyper awareness of spatial areas and can fit stuff in where you wouldn't think you could fit something in.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. I don't know if Tetris gave me that, but I mean, I did play it, and maybe, I mean, I feel like I'm okay at packing trucks and shit, so I think maybe it's
Well, and we all
possible,
use different skills for different things. Like my first, very, very first college education was in graphic design and web design back in the early 90s.
Right,
That's not a
right,
job I ever want.
right. I wonder too sometimes about that whole thing. It's like talking about pandemic shit. Do you think like what do you think the reckoning for like higher education will be, right? Because well, okay, first tier, I understand there are overhead costs and there are salaries to pay, but if you come back and it is not in-person university, I don't see how you can keep the tuition the same. I feel
I
like if
can't.
fall 2020 semester is not in person, you need to drop the tuition. I don't say eliminate it, but it needs to drop at least 15%, right?
Right.
So that's my first thought on it, I guess. Um, so there's that. And then secondly, like, do you think the whole thing's gonna change at all?
I
Do
think
you
it's going to
see
end up
like,
tanking.
okay,
I think we're going to finally come to a model where we have to continue our educational system more like everywhere else in the world.
yeah, yeah, I'd agree with that. Do you like? What do you think that? Do you think like let's say next like 3 to 5 years? What do you think the biggest change in like higher ed might be, or do you think we won't see any in that time?
I think the reckoning is now that people are realizing there's very little that you actually need a freaking degree for, barring things you need licenses, like being a surgeon, because obviously you need to finish that school to be a surgeon or whatever,
Right,
or a doctor or a therapist. Like there are obviously things, engineers, things that absolutely do need degrees for, but there are so few things that you need a degree for that Kim Kardashian's proving it by just reading books and going to take her lawyer exam in California. I feel like I want to do that. I want to go be a freaking lawyer. I can do
right.
that. I can gain
I
that knowledge.
never, I didn't think that you would channel like a Kim Kardashian pathway, but I hear what you're saying, you know.
But I mean, the point is the same, right? If I can read Like obviously not with the I I'm a trained medic, so I have a little bit of an advantage, but I could read a nursing manual and do some hands-on stuff and pass the licensing.
Yep.
But that's something that I would rather my nurses went to school. So I think that's still going to be a requirement, because that's super important. But there's so many other things that you don't need to have an MBA or even an associate's degree to do. Like I don't need an associate's degree to work in a chem lab.
Right.
Teach me what you need me to know. It's not people that work in biology labs or chem labs or stuff like that. They're not. It's specified. They're very specific about what they're doing. It's not a just broad stroke farting around, right? Give me a few classes and some books on how to conduct myself in a lab, and then let's go for it. Tell me what I'm looking for or not looking for. Give me the stats I need to write down for you.
Right.
There's so many things that, and you can pay me well for that because I did take the time to learn.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And now I'm applying it. So I feel like our as a country, our education, our post-secondary education is going to tank.
Yeah. I mean, I just feel like, I don't know how best to articulate this. I just feel like it's too rooted in like virtue signaling in a way, like, oh, my kid went to this school or whatever, right? So it's as much a parent level as it is a student in post-secondary level, right? It's the same thing with weddings where it's like, oh, it's about us. No, it's about your parents and your grandparents just as much if they're alive, just as much as it's about you, right? It's not more. So I think the virtue signaling thing is like, you'll hear moms all the time be like, oh, well, it has such and such great program or such and such great professor. And it's like, yes, it does. But here's the thing. You will learn more from those professors by listening to them on podcast hits than you will by going to that school, because you're not going to have access to them as an undergraduate. Maybe as a graduate, right? And then it's like we're putting people $300K in debt when there's not necessarily the promise of a job on the back end either,
Right.
So it's just a confusing little ecosystem,
Well, there's not a good enough gauge of what we're going to need in the future. And even what we need right now, like obviously literally right now we need a lot more healthcare workers, but you can't graduate from any sort of healthcare program in less than 18 months. So That's off the table, right? Unless you were to go, hey, do you want a job in healthcare? Let's get you started as the orderly. That used to be how it was though, remember? Like people would start out as the orderly and take classes on the side to get up to the nurse level.
Right. I agree.
And I'm not saying that's everybody's path, but that's one path that I don't think is visited as much. Right.
No, and I agree. And then you hear people talk about bringing back the trades and stuff all the time, and I think that has value. And I think more people need to be considering that pathway, because as white collar shit gets more in bed with technology, there's just not going to be as many human roles, and technology is not a big enough sector of the economy. Like, it's a high growth sector, no doubt, but like, we still need people in retail. We still need people to fix technology when it breaks. We still need people in service industry. We still need people doing these like face-to-face things, right? And it's like, you see all these fucking kids being sent to like STEM summer camps, and that stuff matters, and it's good to have a background in that, but like, the whole economy, in my opinion, is never going to be technology. There's still going to be other things that have to happen, and subdivisions and exchanges and everything, right? So I think like we need to rethink pathways on it. Trades is like a common answer. I went to something 3-4 years ago where you were saying like the top 10 plumbers in DFW average like 600K a year, whereas like an average like marketing salary out of college is probably like 55, right? So
If
like
you're
fucking
lucky,
learn
yeah.
to be a plumber, you know? So I think trades is another answer. Like I kind of do agree with the idea that this is controversial, I guess, but like I don't disagree with the bell curve in the sense of like somebody fucking needs to work at McDonald's and McDonald's is not going to cease to be a company, but
Right.
those jobs should be high school jobs, okay? Almost always. And like, yes, you can land there in your 40s or 50s, and I get it. And there's like different things that happen in life or pathways, or you just want to bolster stuff. Like, I think we need to have more like respect for the idea of a job, whereas like we've made it very transactional, and that allows like the executive level to kind of be like, well, if we terminate you, something else will be there, right? There's plenty of fucking jobs, or go drive Uber or whatever, right?
Right.
And I think we need like a higher degree of respect for the idea of employment. I think that's what I'm trying to say, but I just like that stuff trips me out all the time, you know?
Well, and here's the thing, and people will argue that high school students don't need a living wage.
Right,
But some of them do, because some of them are the only income their mother with cancer has.
right,
So, but yeah, and along those lines, because those things will always be around, and because we will always need quality people, period, in any
right,
setting, period.
right,
This is why we need to be paying position and person. You need to take in the totality of circumstances. If I was to go back and work at Gordman's again seasonally this fall, which is something I've done off and on over time,
mm,
because I'm often alone in the holidays, and that's a lot of times that's the only social interaction I get. And the holidays are especially hard for people like me who literally has nobody. So, and I don't mind making $9 an hour. I'm pretty set. But the deal is, the
right.
other people that work with me, sometimes that's their second, third, fourth job. That shouldn't be a thing
Yeah,
happening.
no, I agree with that. And like
You need
Mark
to be paying
Cuban,
them a base. If you need to pay them hourly, fine. But so, like in Montana, there's no tipping.
right,
And what I mean by that is, I worked there. I worked under some pretty cool chefs for a while and ran front of houses and that sort of thing. So I got to dig into that. And what I mean is, they pay you and then you make your tips. They do
right,
not commingle. And that actually is easier on a company
right,
because you don't have to keep track. But so many companies want to spend less and less and less money. And that's why hospitality jobs are a dime a dozen, right? Because you're making $2 an hour and relying on your shitty Karens to decide you're the best server they've ever had and leave you a minimum of 15%.
right, for sure.
Why would you do that? And there's a
Right,
reason they don't do that in Europe either. But Montana and Arizona both are states like that where you make your salary. Like I was so surprised my first paycheck in the restaurant. I was like, but I made all these tips. She's like, yeah, we don't count those. That's not how we work up here. Those are
yeah,
yours.
yeah, it's ridiculous, man. It's not, yeah,
And there needs to be a structure and a mandate. Like that's how all restaurants in this country should be run.
right, right. I agree with that. I can't disagree with that for sure.
And
Um,
the same with the retail job, right? All of the people that work in the retail job, they start out at $12 an hour, which is not a living wage for anybody by any means.
no,
But let's go back to the high schooler making money, because to be honest, my first high school job, I was making $16 an hour in 1992, and my right out of high school job, which was a year later, working for writing Honda warranty for a car company, I was making $18 an hour just to start, and that's a lot of money for a 17-year-old to be making.
right,
But they were paying on they wanted to keep me. I was a good enough worker. They were paying person and position, right? The women that had been there longer than me were up making 20-something dollars an hour.
Yeah.
They paid based on longevity, if they wanted to keep you around, what your potential was to learn. Could you have a lateral move in the company? Like I could have become a car mechanic and made way more than that.
Right.
And so to that end, every time I take a job at like Gordman's or Target, they should be paying me a minimum of whatever it would take me to make rent each month.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. Like, there's a degree of respect in the economic discussion, but also just for the idea of having a job, right? And like, I don't always love Mark Cuban, but he has a thing about if you run a company and you generate even over like $2 million, if you have anybody on your payroll that needs government assistance, you're a joke. Okay. Like if you're generating multiple millions of dollars of revenue, much less multiple billions of dollars, and people that work for you still need to lean on assistance programs, that's a problem, you know? So
well, and in that same vein, like if you here's the cycle that I see happening, and may or may not be true. I'm not an economist, but I do understand how numbers work. If I hire you and I'm at Walmart and I'm paying you a wage that says, and giving you insurance, right? So you have health insurance, you have a wage that says, I can even go on mini vacations on my days off and like afford to go out of town for a few days, right? So whatever that amount of money is, that's what I've started you out at. That's what I'm paying you. You are going to love your job and show up every day that you can, right?
I agree. Yeah.
And that's going to make that place a better place to work.
Yeah.
That's going to make people want to come into your work and shop because you're happy and you're spreading that everywhere.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think the drawback is that it's hard to easily define that shit on a balance sheet or a document that
right.
someone with authority is comfortable with, right? But I don't disagree. I think obviously the whole tenet of like any discussion about engagement or experience or whatever is like you want people to come here and you're never going to fully enjoy work unless you're doing something you're passionate about, but you want people to come there and not want to like hang themselves, right? Because it's like how are they going to serve anybody else, like a customer, a client, blah blah blah, if they're not like if they're completely checked out on being there? And like, lest you think this is only a service industry discussion, we see this shit all the time in white collar jobs, right?
No, I think it's all encompassing. And more to Mark Cuban's point, not even based on income. If you own a company and your employees need to still be on assistance, you're not running your business properly.
No, I agree with that 100%.
Hire fewer people at a higher wage then, because this harkens back to the whole. You can make $15,000 a month, or you can make $2,000 a month. The work is the same.
Right.
Like the amount of work is the same.